There's a moment, brief and quiet, when someone doubts you. Not your words, your presence. And like most, you explain, "I didn't mean it like that." But Machiavelli knew that moment, it costs everything. The fool isn't loud. He's just predictable. He reveals too much, defends too fast, and in power games, that's not innocence. It's a scent, a signal. But what if silence made them uneasy? What if your restraint was the loudest threat in the room? Stay. This might change how you carry every word from now on. Chapter 1. The Shattered Fairy Tale. Believing intentions equal respect. The fool thought being good was enough, that if his heart was pure, people would recognize it, that kindness would protect him and effort would earn him respect. But Machiavelli would have laughed, because goodness isn't armor, it's bait. The fool lives in a fairy tale, one where intentions are honored, where saying "I tried" makes failure noble, where others are expected to see his heart even when he's not getting results. He thinks the world works on feeling, not force. But what he doesn't see, what most never see, is that effort doesn't earn respect, impact does. And when outcomes don't show up, no one sticks around to applaud your effort. Machiavelli knew the world doesn't care about your heart, it fears your consequence. Power isn't granted for being sincere, it's earned through presence, pressure, and precision. Kindness without leverage is not virtue, it's camouflage. It tells others they can take from you. It invites exploitation disguised as acceptance. And worse, it keeps the fool trapped, thinking he's noble, while others quietly move past him. There was a man named Mark. The fool lives in him. He stayed late, helped his team, avoided conflict. When he was overlooked, he blamed politics. He thought, why don't they value loyalty? But when the big promotion came, it went to someone newer, someone bolder, someone less nice, but more effective. Mark sat in silence, stunned, in the very room he thought he'd earned. The chair was pulled out, but not for him. That was the moment it broke. The illusion shattered. The fool realized it wasn't betrayal, it was the natural result of a message he'd been sending for years. I don't need recognition. I don't ask for more. I'm safe. I'm quiet. I'll stay in the background. He had taught them to overlook him, to rely on him, but never reward him. His kindness had no edge, his loyalty had no price, and now it had no voice. Maybe you've been Mark. Maybe the fool lives in you too. You've believed that being kind is enough, that effort speaks louder than noise, that people will just know how much you care. But if you've ever felt unseen, passed over, or quietly dismissed, this is why. Not because you lacked goodness, but because you lacked consequence. If this made you rethink your patterns, comment below, not to be seen, but to signal you've started the climb. Now something in you is waking up, something sharper, something tired of being the invisible one. But be careful, because after the illusion shatters, most fools don't become stronger. They panic, they explain, they beg to be understood. They expose their ego, hoping it looks like strength. And that, Machiavelli warned, is the next trap. That's chapter 2. The naked ego, the overcorrection, the breakdown. Miss it, and the fool returns. Only this time, louder, more desperate, and still powerless. Chapter 2. The naked ego. Defending weakness with noise. The fool thought he was being calm, that silence, patience, and kindness would protect him. But it took just one comment, one sharp remark in a room full of people for his blood to boil. "You're too sensitive," someone said with a smirk. And just like that, he unraveled. He jumped in to defend himself. "That's not what I meant," he said. "You don't understand what I was trying to do." He raised his voice, not out of confidence, but fear. He started explaining things no one asked, justifying decisions no one was questioning, clarifying details that didn't need to be said, and the more he spoke, the smaller he felt. His words didn't protect him, they exposed him. What was meant to restore his dignity only confirmed his desperation. Machiavelli knew true power doesn't explain itself. It doesn't chase clarity, it creates it. When you defend your image, you reveal how fragile it is. When you rush to be understood, you admit you're afraid of being misunderstood. And those who seek control don't fear your words, they wait for your patterns. Mark, the loyal worker from before, fell straight into this trap. After being passed over, he tried to stay composed, but then someone mentioned, maybe Mark's just not assertive enough. It wasn't even an attack, just an offhand comment, but to Mark it pierced something deep. He laughed nervously, then launched into a long story about all the times he had spoken up. He talked for minutes, trying to prove he wasn't weak, but every word made him look smaller. People didn't see strength. They saw someone crumbling in real time, and worst of all, no one had accused him of anything. Until he opened his mouth. Later, Mark sat alone in his car, face flushed with shame. He replayed every word he said, wishing he could rewind it all. The worst part wasn't that they judged him, it was that he had handed them the script. He had shown his wounds. He thought silence would make him invisible, but now he understood. It was his only shield, and he had dropped it. The fool wasn't naive anymore. He was exposed. The illusion of safety had cracked, but he still didn't know how to hold his power. He still thought words could rebuild what silence once protected. And so, the fool kept talking, digging the hole deeper. But if you think overreacting is dangerous, wait until you see what happens when comfort disguises itself as strength. In The Chains of Comfort, if this message is cutting deeper than most, don't lose it to the algorithm, subscribe or advise. This isn't motivation, it's a strategy manual. Chapter 3, The Chains of Comfort, Chasing Pleasure Over Strategy. Not all prisons have bars, some feel like soft pillows. The fool doesn't live in chains, he lives in comfort, scrolling, snacking, joking, escaping. He calls it balance, he calls it self-care, but beneath it all something darker grows. Numbness, not peace, but sedation. Not power, but passivity wrapped in pleasure. He believes he's choosing this, that he's in control, that sleeping in, canceling plans, dodging conflict, or chasing validation are his decisions. But the truth, he's not calling the shots, his urges are. Every day the fool confuses feeling good with being right. He says, I don't feel ready, it just doesn't feel aligned, or I deserve a break. Not realizing these aren't insights, they're excuses. Dopamine doesn't scream, it whispers. It tells him to avoid hard conversations, to check his phone one more time, to say I'll start tomorrow. The fool doesn't rebel, he drifts, choosing the path of least resistance, not realizing that comfort isn't neutral, it's corrosive. Every skipped challenge, every delayed decision, every little escape adds up, not to peace, but to weakness. Mark didn't fall all at once. After his failed defense, he promised to change, but instead of acting, he paused. Just for a moment, he took a few days off, stopped showing up early, let emails wait. He told himself he was recharging. He stopped voicing ideas, thinking, why bother? He laughed more, cared less, and felt proud of his detachment. But inside, he wasn't healing. He was withdrawing. When a new hire got assigned the project he wanted, he didn't protest. He smiled and said, that's fine. No one noticed he was fading, because he had already disappeared. The realization didn't come with a breakdown. It came in silence. Sitting alone on a Friday night, phone in hand, swiping through noise that used to excite him but now felt dull. He wasn't sad, he was numb. He hadn't lost everything, but he couldn't feel anything. And that, he realized, was worse. He hadn't been defeated by others. He had seduced himself into stillness. The fool had stopped defending himself. But not because he had evolved, because he had surrendered to ease, to instant pleasure, to the absence of resistance. He thought this was growth, but it was simply the next phase of decay. Easier to accept, harder to escape. But the worst part isn't comfort, it's what you trade for it. Mystery, restraint, power. And that's what he loses next, in The Dawn of Clarity. Chapter 4. The Dawn of Clarity. Oversharing as self-sabotage. The fool used to speak freely. He thought openness was strength, but lately every word feels like a risk. A raised eyebrow, a careless reply. These little things now linger in his mind longer than they should. He notices how quiet people get when he talks too much. He senses it, even if no one says it. He's exposed, and they're watching. He thought honesty would make him more relatable, that sharing his struggles, his goals, his insecurities would invite trust. So he gave away everything, his fears, his failures, his doubts. I'm just being real, he told himself. But slowly, he began to notice something strange. The more people knew about him, the less they respected him. His confessions didn't humanize him, they weakened him. They made him predictable, and predictability kills power. The fool never learned the line between authenticity and vulnerability. He mistook transparency for courage and forgot that mystery isn't deception, it's protection. Power doesn't exist in what others understand. It lives in what they can't explain. When people don't know your next move, they can't prepare for it. But when you give away your whole story, you give away your leverage. Machiavelli would have warned, once they know your fears, they don't need to guess how to beat you. Once they know your dreams, they know how to disappoint you. The more you reveal, the more you surrender. And the people who listen aren't always listening to help. Some are simply taking notes. Mark had to learn this the hard way. After drifting through comfort, he decided to show up again, but he showed up wrong. In an attempt to reconnect, he opened up during a team meeting. He shared how he'd been struggling, how he'd lost motivation, how he wanted to reset. He thought it would build empathy. Instead, it built doubt. His team smiled politely, but later, someone else got his project, not out of malice, but because Mark no longer felt solid. He felt fragile. He realized it that night, sitting alone, replaying every word. He didn't lose power because he was weak. He lost it because he made himself readable. In trying to be liked, he gave away the one thing he couldn't afford to lose: uncertainty. He didn't need to be accepted. He needed to be untouchable. That was the shift. That was the clarity. You know someone who needs this. Share it, not to save them, but to remind them. No one escapes the game by being nice. He was no longer naive, but he wasn't yet dangerous. He stood in the space between, still learning how to hold silence like a weapon, still deciding what to share and what to keep. That thin line between being open and being owned. Knowing what to hide is power, but knowing who to trust with your truth, that's the next battlefield. The grip of control. Chapter 5. The grip of control. Escaping the echo chamber. The fool was surrounded by agreement. Smiles, nods, polite approval. People laughed at his jokes, reassured him after small failures, and echoed his words like a chorus trained to please. But approval isn't truth. It's sedation. And the comfort of being constantly affirmed is a soft trap, one that slowly strips away his edge. He didn't notice it at first, but the more compliments he received, the more addicted he became, especially from those who posed no threat, people who weren't wiser, stronger, or sharper than him, just loyal, just agreeable. And slowly, their praise became a leash. It made him predictable, safe, easy to manage. He wasn't growing anymore, he was being groomed to stay the same. Machiavelli warned, "The most dangerous enemy to a ruler is not the rebel, but the advisor who tells him only what he wants to hear." Flattery makes fools feel wise and kings feel invincible, but both become blind to the cracks forming beneath their feet. There are two kinds of voices in every man's life. One challenges you in private, tells you hard truths when no one's watching. The other cheers for you in public, showers you in compliments, never confronts you. Only one of them helps you grow, the other helps you rot. Quietly, politely, with a smile. So ask yourself this: who do you let shape you? Who has permission to say you're wrong? Who's allowed to tell you when you're slipping? If the answer is no one, then maybe you've mistaken comfort for growth. Maybe your circle isn't keeping you strong. Maybe it's keeping you tame. Mark began to feel the shift. After everything, being passed over, misunderstood, numbed by his own openness, he started to look around. He noticed who challenged him and who just nodded. He stopped seeking reassurance and started seeking friction. He didn't want comfort anymore. He wanted accuracy. He didn't want to be celebrated. He wanted to be sharpened. Was no longer the fool chasing applause. He was beginning to choose. Choosing who he let influence him. Choosing which voices to mute. He wasn't bulletproof yet, but he was no longer fragile. This was no longer about feeling safe. It was about staying sharp, even when it hurt. He was almost ready. But power isn't just about others. It's about mastering yourself. And in the final ascent, there are no shortcuts. What part hit you hardest so far? Comment it below, because clarity begins when you name what's been haunting you. Chapter 6. The Ascent to Power. Embracing strategic mastery. He looked like a man in control. The walk, the tone, the posture, everything said power. But it was just a mask, refined, rehearsed, and hollow. Behind the image was fear. Not of losing, but of never being seen. He wasn't wielding power, he was borrowing it, dressing it up, praying it would be enough. The fool copies what he sees. He mimics the presence of strength, sharp suits, cold stares, powerful words. But the strategist doesn't copy. He rewires instinct. He doesn't speak like he owns the room. He walks in, listens, and makes the room adjust to him. No noise, no show, just quiet gravity. Because power isn't about proving anything. It's about not needing to. It lives in moments no one sees. When you say no to ease. When you silence the urge to prove your worth. When you let others underestimate you. The strategist doesn't post progress. He sharpens in secret. He bleeds in silence. And when he returns, he's sharper than before. He waits longer, speaks less, and watches everything. His discipline is surgical. He walks away from applause. He hides clarity behind calm. And when he's tempted to explain himself, he says nothing. Not because he's afraid, but because he no longer needs to be understood. That old version of him, the one who overreacted, overshared, and overcompensated, is gone. Dead and buried. Mark's final battle wasn't against rivals or critics. It wasn't even against the system that overlooked him. It was a war inside, against the voice begging to be seen, against the need to feel safe, against the desperate hunger for validation. And when he won that war, everything changed. The room didn't shift. He did. That's when Mark understood. Real power doesn't arrive with fanfare. It emerges in silence. It shows up when you stop chasing approval and start controlling where your energy goes. Power isn't something you earn from others. It's something you stop handing out. Now, he doesn't rush to respond. He doesn't seek recognition. And the silence he used to fear, It's his sharpest weapon. It's the reason people now lean in, not because he demands their attention, but because he no longer needs it. Mark isn't performing power anymore, he's embodying it. No longer reactive, no longer readable. And that's when the world started to notice. So now, the spotlight shifts. Not to the loudest voice, but to the most disciplined one. And maybe it's your turn. Not to pretend, but to ascend. But don't mistake this as the end, because what comes next will test everything you've built, not with noise, but with meaning. If this feels like chapter 1 of your own transformation, make sure you follow. We're building the unshakable mind, one quiet decision at a time. You've walked through 6 truths, each one stripping away an illusion the world quietly rewards. What once felt noble now feels naive. What once felt natural now feels dangerous. And through that discomfort, you've awakened. You've seen why intention means nothing without impact, why defending yourself makes you weaker, and why comfort is a subtle poison. You've learned that mystery builds strength, that flattery blinds growth, and that true power is forged in silence, solitude, and self-control. This isn't motivation, it's architecture. You've rebuilt the frame from which you see the world and yourself. Picture this. 30 days from now, you walk into any room, not louder, not flashier, but sharper. You speak less, you're harder to read, and yet they pay more attention. That's real control. If this message shook something in you, subscribe and share it, because your transformation isn't finished, it's just begun.